Welcome to the 86 Reason podcast. And I am here today with Bruce Nelson, a fractional CFO, who also happens to have a long, beautiful, and storied history in the restaurant space. And I'm so excited to connect with you, Bruce, because I feel like the term fractional CFO is one that's becoming more and more a part of the daily lexicon of us restaurant people and just the industry in general, business enterprises in general. And more importantly, I have to say you might have one of the most incredibly difficult jobs there is on the market because there's CFOs of all different types of industries, but seems to me like you chose the one that might be the hardest to actually navigate. So I'm excited to hear how you got in.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me on the show.
It's a pleasure to have you. So Bruce, let's start with how this all happened, because I'm sure many people along the way told you were absolutely crazy for choosing to do this. So when did the bug hit you officially?
It wasn't an uncle, it was a father. My father owned restaurants. So from the
Okay.
time I was 4 years old, I was running around kitchens and following my dad in the restaurant. At age 13, I started washing dishes for him in one of the restaurants. By the time
Did
I
he?
was 14, I was cooking on the line, and by the time I was 18, I was writing menus and creating wine lists. So it bit me early, and it's kind of funny. I went off to college to do anything but restaurants because I saw how hard of a life it was on my father, and it's obviously long hours. So, of all things, I went off to college and got a degree in philosophy, figuring there's no way that can possibly translate into the restaurant industry. And now, I'll find somebody that'll pay me to sit on a hill and answer questions.
Well,
But
essentially, you've gotten there, right?
But the irony was, 3 months before I graduated from college, I was writing my senior thesis in philosophy, and an opportunity to buy a restaurant came along, and I bought it. So not only was I trying to get my finals done for my senior year, um, perform my senior thesis, I was writing a menu, hiring staff, and trying to figure out how to open a restaurant. I think it opened about a week after I graduated from college. So that's where it all started.
Wow. Bruce, I did not expect that. Okay, so
Yep.
let's dive a little bit into that. So, what kind of spot was your father running back in those days?
In those days, it was a family style restaurant. In this neck of the woods, it was called Country Kitchen, but it would be probably very similar to a Perkins restaurant if
Okay.
you're familiar with those. It was a family style restaurant. That's the one I started with. By the time I got to 18, I was also running a country club dining facility. So that's where I got more involved into the bar and wine list part of
Okay.
the industry.
All right. And then considering you essentially grew up in a restaurant, when you finally got, and I mean, this is a young age that you got your first crack at being a business owner. What
hmm
type of restaurant did you open, and how long did it last, and how many ulcers did it create for you?
Well, when you're young and stupid, it's not a lot of ulcers.
Oh, fair,
We,
fair. Or you don't know they're there.
we right, exactly. I would think I was 22 years old, and I had a business partner who was 20. I was the only one old enough to get a liquor license, so it was under my name. Um, it was a fine dining restaurant. It was open in northern Minnesota, in resort area. We open at 4 o'clock at night, and we're open till I think 1 o'clock. This is the funny part is, my whole philosophy for figuring out what to sell and what to charge was to go to my nearest competitor. I copied their menu and charged $1 less per item. That was my
Wow.
brilliant strategy. So that first year, we were busy. We had people waiting in line to sit in the restaurant. But I got to the end of the season, and it's like I don't have any money. because
Really?
apparently copying somebody else's recipe or a menu and charging a buck less is not a financial plan for success. So,
Wow. How long did this place last?
well, that was the first season. So we got to the end of the season with no money, and my partner and I looked at each other and said, "Okay, we're going to do one of two things. We're either not going to do this again because it was a lot of work for no money, or we're going to figure out what we don't know." So the two of us actually holed up in a hotel room over Valentine's weekend, which is kind of funny, but uh,
Yeah.
and we wrote in the old Lotus 123 program a payroll, a way to do payroll and a way to track menu costs. And
Whoa.
we then revamped the concept, repriced the menu, opened up for a second season, and surprisingly made money. So that only lasted 2 years, and then we sold that restaurant. He got married and went off a different direction. I moved down to the Twin Cities, and then from there, I worked for a couple of very large operators in the Minneapolis area, running high level catering venues. I'd serve
Okay.
about 1,500, 2,000 people an evening in this venue. Then I went to work for a very large Italian market and eatery. Um, and then finally ended up at the Target Center where the Timberwolves play. I was running the suite level of Target Center, feeding I don't know, 2,000 people in
Whoa.
68 corporate suites before every game. So that was
And
really where I went after that first run with the restaurant.
and Bruce, this was all in an operational capacity, right? You weren't at
Right.
that point in the financial portion of the operation.
No, no, that's where the funny part is. So so far it makes sense, right?
That's exactly right. So,
Okay.
but I'm following your trajectory, and interestingly enough, I've always had questions about. I've never, honest, I've done catering events, but I've never worked in catering. Everybody always tells me it is,
Hmm.
if you run it well, it's one of those businesses that can really become a cash cow,
It
uh,
can.
right?
Yeah. Wouldn't every restaurant like to have a guaranteed number and sales number before you buy anything or schedule anybody?
Right. But then the other little wrinkle is, how about trying to get a bunch of ornery line cooks to uh, hop in a van across the state and make sure everything's
Right.
cold and whatnot, right? So
Yeah, on that
interesting.
on that front, the Super Bowl of 1991 was in Minneapolis, and I catered 7 corporate tents on Harriet Island, a little island here in town, 3 meals a day. So imagine trying to serve hot food on a cold island.
Oof. Well,
So
I
I know
mean,
what you're talking about.
if on the other hand side of that, at least if you make a big thing of chicken stock and you need to keep it cold, you just leave it outside and make right.
Oh, now
So
you're learning our secrets.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so then you worked in what was essentially some pretty large operations,
Yes.
and and then so what was the next step after this?
Well, here's the interesting part. So I had been in the business about 20 years. We're talking about 1999, and the bug to open my own place bit me
Came
again.
back, huh?
And Um, I found a property in northern Minnesota, bought the property, and built a restaurant from the ground up. So a restaurant called Portofino,
Okay.
restaurant and world market. And here's where my story matches a lot of guys is I from my background, I had I was pretty good at operations. I knew how to
Yeah.
write a menu. I knew how to hire and train staff. I knew how to do service standards. I knew how to cost out a menu. I knew how to design a restaurant, for heaven's sakes. So I
Yeah.
thought, this is a
And do
no-brainer. And
operations at scale. And do operations at
right,
scale,
right,
right?
exactly. It's like, okay, I'm an operator. I know what I'm doing. And I obviously convinced the banker because they gave me the money to build this thing.
Wow.
And I opened up a restaurant. I opened up this restaurant, and we were crazy busy. On a Monday night, I still had a 45-minute wait for people coming in there,
Wow.
and money was flowing in. I thought everything was great until, oh, about 2 months in, and all of a sudden, every 2 weeks, the when I had to make payroll, it drained every dime out of my check account. And then all of a sudden, vendors started calling me and said, "Hey, when are you going to pay that invoice?" And for all the operational skills I had never learned anything about finance. So here I was running this restaurant. I had put everything on the line to build this thing, mortgaged my house and everything to build it.
Mm.
And I got into this thing. It's like, I don't know how to make money. And
Wow.
I reached out to friends, sympathetic, but they didn't know how to do it. I talked to my CPA and asked him, they know how to file taxes, but CPAs don't know how to run restaurants.
Yeah.
I went to old industry friends and tried to figure out, well, what am I not, what don't I know? Well, long story short, after 13 months, I closed the door on that dream restaurant, and it was devastating.
Wow. I
It
can
was
only
absolutely
imagine.
devastating. So this is like 2001, 2002, right in that area. And I actually took a break from the restaurant industry. I went and taught culinary arts at Le Cordon Bleu just because I couldn't, I needed a break.
Of
That lasted
course.
for a couple of years, but then I got back into restaurants. And the long story short is I actually went to work for a corporate office. I started with a small restaurant group here in the Twin Cities. They were great operators, but they didn't really have a corporate office structure. So I got in there and I started learning at the corporate level. What do you really need to know about setting up a restaurant or a restaurant group for success? So that group, when I joined them, was about 13 million. They had 4 stores and maybe 250 employees. I was there
Hmm.
for 15 years, and
Wow.
as their CFO. By the time I left in 2023, they were over 66 million, 10 stores, and 1,000 employees. So I got
Wow.
to learn firsthand while somebody else was doing the operations and taking all the risk, how to really truly set up a restaurant for success. I'm through that. I became very technologically savvy. I was one of the first guys in the Twin Cities to find Restaurant 365 and plug them into this restaurant group.
Yeah.
That was in 2016. So, gosh, I've been with them for with that software for over 10 years now.
Wow.
Um, Same thing with POS integrations. Throughout my restaurant career, I was always the one that was researching, finding technology, and implementing it. So, a big chunk of what I do now is really understanding people's technology and saying, okay, do we have it set up the most efficiently? Are we connecting all the integrations the way they should be? Are we actually
Sure.
being able to get this information and do something important with it?
It's incredible, Bruce. And, I'm sure so much was informed by the group that you worked with in the Twin Cities. And, the first thing I wonder is um, when you're when you're looking from an eagle's eye at what's happening at the operations from a revenue and financials perspective, what kind of effect can can the corporate office truly have on the profitability of store when so many different mechanics, operational decisions, the day-to-day, the staffing, etc., is so dependent on the leaders within the actual property? How do you try to affect that change?
Well, you nailed it, Xavier. I often tell people I don't make anybody a dime sitting in my office. All the strategies I come up with, all the analytics, all the things that I recommend to a restaurant group to do, if we can't translate that to the store and get the operations people to do it, you know, I don't schedule anybody. I don't
Hmm.
cook a single item anymore. You know, I
Right.
I don't write recipes. So the whole point is from my perspective in the work I do is to be the liaison between what I see on the financial side and how do I communicate that to the store the store level managers and district managers, and more importantly, how how do how do I get them involved in wanting to live those numbers, to live those recommendations? Because you know as well as I do, you've run these places before. The last thing anybody wants to hear is if some guy from corporate has an idea on how you're going to be able to cut costs or improve something while
Yeah.
they're staring at a line out the door, tickets to the floor, and a dishwasher and a bartender that called out sick.
Yeah, of
Right.
course. Yeah. Uh,
So that's the challenge, and that's my specialty. Is I really work hard at it because I speak that operation language, because I speak that chef language, as well as a finance guy. I can get in there and and communicate with the ops people. The only thing I don't do is speak Spanish, which I wish I did, because some of the kitchen guys I need a little bit of help with.
Absolutely. Well, even in the even in the kitchen Spanish, I feel like a certain look or a hey, I mean, the it's interesting. I feel like the restaurants have their own language, just much like
Yeah.
music, and I sure you do just fine in a kitchen
Yeah. Well,
with
I know what they mean when they call me Gordo. So
all that means is you love to eat, and because they call me Gordo too. Don't worry. So interesting, Bruce, and in those experiences, did you in the former in that 15-year experience, did you have to close any stores, and were there alarm bells that went off when things weren't structurally or foundationally set right?
yes, there was one when I came into that group. They had a couple of pizza shops. They were mostly full service um, American dining restaurants, but they had opened a couple of smaller pizza dine-in takeout operations, and one just was quite frankly in a bad area. Food was
Mm,
great. People loved our food, but it was in an area that just didn't attract um, the dine-in. So although it hit metrics for delivery, we needed butts and chairs. That
yeah,
was one that we actually looked at and said, that made the hard decisions like this. There's just there's no magic I can do here. We tried
sure.
everything. We tried adjusting the menu prices. We tried every trick in the book that we could to bring people in there, and at best it was a dollar for dollar exchange. You know, I'm gonna give you a dollar to come in there to try something. So
Yeah,
yeah. So
it's
that we closed. The other one we sold. It was mildly profitable, but it didn't fit the owner's profit objectives.
okay.
So we got a good price on it. We sold it,
Okay.
and then focused on full service restaurants, which if you can imagine, 10 full service restaurants at 66 million, it's a pretty good average.
No, it's great.
Um,
It's great.
per store, and we really figured out that's where that group's sweet spot was. It was a chef driven concept. They were all independents. It wasn't a chain, so every restaurant had its own unique character, but all the systems behind the scene were the same.
Hmm.
The methodologies were the same, and how we created them and operated them. So that's where we found there was our sweet spot.
Excellent. So, for someone who's considering bringing on a fractional CFO, when do you think within the journey of a restaurant operator's, um, through their path, when is the right time in your opinion? Because I know many operators who don't have CFOs, or many that rely mostly on their controllers or accountants to make decisions. But I've always been taught, and I don't know if this is correct, but maybe you can chime in on this too. I've always been taught that accountants are people who look back, but that finance and CFOs are those who look at what's happening today and plan ahead. Um, so
Yep.
I'd love to hear your feedback on that and when you think the right time is to jump in and look for your type of
I
support.
I find that probably the most usually when people are looking at this is it's first of all it's volume. Um, Pretty much 10 million to $40 million a year in revenue seems to be where my clients fall,
Okay.
and it makes sense. At 10 million, you're more than likely multi-store. If you're a
Yes.
quick serve restaurant, maybe you got half a dozen of these things, and if you're fine dining, you got at least two. So
Okay.
you now have figured out how to at least duplicate your restaurants, and you have some systems in place. You have accounting, bookkeepers, maybe a controller, um, working on keeping the information together, up to about 40 million. You start getting over 40 million, and then you're brushing on the the area where you probably might think about bringing a full-time one of me in. So
Okay.
that seems to be the sweet spot. But really, what it's driven by after that is an event. And what would that
Mm,
event be? Number one would be growth. Okay, I'm $10
sure.
million. We're figuring out how to do this. We want to grow. So again, to your point of looking forward, that's when you'd want to bring in a fractional and say, okay, you can grow smart, or you
Hmm.
can, try to grow lucky.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I
Absolutely.
tend to show up in restaurants that are in growth mode. Number one. Number two, a place where I show up is maybe a transition is happening. You've
Understood.
uh, you've uh, you've had this restaurant or restaurant group for a while. Maybe you want to turn it over to your children. Maybe you want to prepare it for sale. So I show up a lot on the M&A side, and uh, you don't need a full-time CFO to go through a sale, but it is very helpful to have one 18 months to 2 years before you want to sell, because we'll come in, and if you tell us you're preparing to sell, we will make sure the financials get cleaned up. We will tell you what you're worth now, and if you do these 10 things, you could be worth $2-3 million more in a couple of years.
Interesting.
So the idea that uh, the worst thing is when someone hires me and says I want to sell tomorrow. It's like, I'll help you. And I've
Right.
done that. I've actually worked with a couple that said, you know what, maybe it's a medical thing they have to sell. Maybe they're just so burned out they don't want to do it anymore, and
Sure.
there's nobody in their family that wants it. And they basically just throw the towel and said, I'm done. I'll help you
Yeah.
do that, and I'll still I'll put your financials together. I'll work with your broker, your real estate folks, and do the due diligence for a sale.
Sure.
But I'm always kind of sad, because if you would have given me 18 months, I probably could have got you more money,
Very
because
interesting.
the things I see are the same things buyers see. And if we
Sure.
don't get them corrected, they basically say they'll look at that and they're not going to pay you for something that is not either producing what it should, and or if it's messy and there's some stuff that they're going to have to assume that's kind of messy, they're just going to knock it off the price.
Interesting. And you mentioned something earlier about your experience with your second restaurant. Forgive me, I was gonna say
Yeah.
first, but your second at Portofino. Looking back, I often do this because I also owned a restaurant and I was lucky enough, Bruce. I sold my restaurant. I want to say it was September 1st or 2nd of 2008. And it was
Oh
like
yeah.
just days before the stock market just completely imploded on itself. And I remember I was pretty upset because it was also my lifelong dream to open a restaurant. And I was sitting on a
Right.
friend's back patio, sipping a tequila. And I remember just being like, man, I'm such a failure. I can't believe what just happened to me. And then the Bear Stearns and everything that happened after that. And then all my friends were calling me saying, see, it's not that bad, but
Right.
yeah,
Right. Well, that's when I started with that restaurant group, was in 2009. And so they were
oof,
reeling from that economic slowdown. That was their impetus to hire me at that time, as they were having trouble managing cash flow. So it was so I get it. I'm sorry, I lost a question in there
no,
somewhere.
no, no. So what I was going to ask you was, in looking back, do you ever look back on that experience and kind of coach your old self and maybe think about some things that you would have done differently? I mean, was it tough from the start, or do you think there was things that you could have changed?
I wrote that book about it.
Myth? No way.
The restaurant management, the myth, the magic, the math. And it was devastating to me. And I honestly did. I spent many, many years trying to figure out what it was I didn't know.
Wow.
So it's in the book there where I go back and I look at, okay, what did I miss here? And the reality is, um, I didn't know how to price my menu for profit. Just like that first restaurant, when I opened up that restaurant and I went to my competitors and copied their menu for a
Yeah.
dollar less, I kind of did the same thing with this second restaurant, but more sophisticated. I'd come out of a restaurant um, that was doing $5-6 million a year, and I was his general manager, and I worked with the owner, and I understood the metrics. You know,
Right.
labor cost needs to be at 29%, and food cost needs to be at whatever it was
30.
32%.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at his model and saying, okay, that's the magic. So I went to open my restaurant and I just set my labor and food targets based on what I had witnessed was successful. But my restaurant didn't do 6 million. It
Right.
did about half of that.
Wow.
So
Right.
I learned a very important lesson, something called overhead, that
Yeah.
every single restaurant, even within a chain, give me a chain of 10 restaurants, same concept, they're going to have different overhead. And it's
Yeah.
going to be based on maybe the lease is more expensive in this location and another. My build out might have been more expensive. A store I build today is going to cost more than one had out there 10 years ago.
Yeah. Of
So
course.
overhead, as it turns out, is a pretty darn important thing to understand. So not understanding how much of every item you sell must cover heat, light, rent, labor, and all of those
Insurance,
things.
lights. Yeah.
Exactly. So the book I wrote is basically teaches you how to apply the math to any restaurant situation, whether it's a $10 million store that's knocking out of the park, or a $1 million store. Maybe I actually helped um, a woman who owns a small restaurant in the Canary Islands, and I
I
want to
love the
say the weekly
Canaries.
volume is maybe, I don't know, $15,000 a week.
Okay.
And the math works the same for her restaurant as it does for 10 million because it's just math.
It's a scale, right?
Hence the title. It's like the myth, the magic, the math. I
I love
operated
it.
a lot on myth that if I do X, this would make me successful. The magic is what every restaurant needs. If
Yeah.
you can't create a warm, inviting, enticing environment, you're not going to survive either. And that's what we do and how we design them. Our food, our ambiance, music, lights, all that stuff is the magic. The math is what makes it work.
I love the title because you're absolutely right. Every one of those have to work in synergy to make
Mhm.
to make the restaurant run. And even when that is all aligned, it still is an incredibly difficult business. So I love that you wrote a book, Bruce. That's so cool. I got to check it. I want to read it now.
Well, after this, send me your physical address. I'll pop one in the mail to you.
That'd be amazing because, I often look back on my restaurant days and, I have like these eureka moments, even 20 years later, because I saw, it's been quite a while since that happened. And I'll have these
Mhm.
moments like, should have done this. But obviously, looking back, I
Yeah,
probably just wouldn't have opened it. So
you know what? It's funny because everybody asks, you gonna ever open another one? And I always thought I got one more in me. Now that I've actually, I fumbled through the first one and had a lot of fun and made a little bit of money. I totally botched the second one, so I thought, okay, I got to do the third one. But I launched this business a year ago, and I've expanded it. I've got two bookkeepers. I brought on a marketing partner and a data integrity specialist. So I think my final chapter is going to be growing this business and ultimately, it's more fun being able to help a lot of restaurants than to go back
Sure.
in and just do one. So I probably right now have, I don't know, 30, 40 restaurants that I work with.
Amazing. And
Um,
and to your point, it's beautiful to be able to. I'm sure some of them are super successful, others are struggling,
yep,
right? And
all of the above, and they're they all came to me for one of those reasons I mentioned. They're
sure,
either trying to get ready to transition, they want to grow, or in some rare cases they're really struggling on the cash flow, like that first group I came into after
yeah,
2008. And those are the biggest challenge for me, but they're also the ones that really draw at my heart because
sure.
I know
You've
what
been
it
there.
feels like
Yeah,
when a vendor calls you and says, hey, you got to pay this invoice or I can't deliver. I know what it's like when you got to make payroll. And I've called bankers and said, hey, you got to cover these payroll checks. I can't bring my account up to positive until I get my Friday deposit. And
right.
I've been that guy. And so when a restaurant is truly in that situation, it's like that's where I really, my heart goes out to them because I've been there, and that's why I do the work I do. Is I really want to try to help them overcome that so they can enjoy and live the dream that they set out to build.
Of course, it's incredibly difficult, Bruce. I mean, you know firsthand, and to that, I mean, you have seen a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
I can only imagine the experiences, the iterations, the evolution, the Food Network craze. I mean, the fast casual craze. I mean, I feel like you've really gotten a chance, and the '08 crash, gotten
Yeah.
gotten a chance to see a lot from the lens of a restaurant operator. And I'd love your take on what do you think is happening right now, I'll set the stage for you. I've
Yeah.
had, in my neighborhood where I live in Sarasota, Florida, there's a handful of restaurants that always seem to be busy, and I think they got the magic down, Bruce. Great
Hmm.
locations, the vibe is great, the food is consistent, the service is consistent, and obviously the math works. But then
Yeah.
there's others that no matter how much they invest or the build out or whatever, it just doesn't seem to work. And I'm noticing it doesn't necessarily seem to uh, align with the price point because there are restaurants that are incredibly expensive. And I can't believe I've come to a time where ordering a strip steak at a steakhouse is now $100 a head experience.
Yeah.
It's wild, but those
Yeah.
kinds of places are still busy, while maybe like a local pizzeria may not be. So, what do you think is happening in the overall environment right now?
As long as I've been doing this, which is plus 45 years, there are two things that never change. If you can't provide service and product that people want, there's not a whole lot that any CFO or operations manager can come in and do.
Mm.
And what I think is happening in the industry is I think we're all getting a little overexcited about technology. And instead of those blocking and tackling food and service, we're looking at, boy, if I just put in this software, it will help me manage it'll help me manage my labor. If I can just put in this food costing program, I can figure out how to get better food costs. And these are not to be ignored, but I think it's far too easy to put all of our hopes and efforts into those and take our eye off of the fundamental thing I go out to when I eat is I want to have somebody serve me. I
Yeah,
want to have a good time. I want to enjoy myself. It's not about the money. You know,
yeah,
I'll pay for that experience, whether it's that $100 strip loin or a $5 slice and a Coke.
Yeah.
But I want that service. So, and to finish up on the question, we have one more thing coming at us. It's driving everybody crazy. It's called AI. So it's out there, and I work with some up and coming companies. One is a friend of mine. He's launching a company called Roasted Data that's going to take a lot of the analytics to a new level. Um, and I'm excited for this myself because I think
Sure.
as AI comes in and does a lot of the analytics stuff that I do, my role is going to switch to being far more advisory
Mm-hmm.
than analytics producing because AI can do it in seconds. But
Mm-hmm.
somebody still has to tell it what are the important metrics? What do we
Sure.
want you to look at? Where should we use AI? We should
Sure.
use AI to maybe take a look at some schedule optimization and some ordering optimization and things like that. But it better not have anything to do with customer service.
Yeah.
Because if all of a sudden I perceive there's a robot figuring out when and where I'm going to be seated, how I order, what I'm ordering, the price I'm paying, I'm gonna turn off real fast.
Interesting.
There's some restaurants that talk about dynamic pricing, and maybe that's popped up on some of the other podcasts. And I know some people that do this, and I'm not a fan of it because, um, I don't want my burger to cost more on a Friday night than it does on Tuesday night. And if you do that
Yeah.
to me, I'm not coming back.
I agree.
No,
It's interesting because so much of the restaurant industry, there's this romantic feel to it. It's kind of like opening a bottle of wine, and spent
yeah,
a lot of time in restaurants, and I just don't know if there is a sexy celebratory way to open up a screw cap closure. It's become way more a thing, right? But
yeah,
I still feel like it's not as, I don't know. It takes the
yeah.
romance out.
It
And I
does.
think, right? And I feel the
Uh,
same happens as you get tech too involved
Yeah,
in the experience. And to your point, the magic, right? Going back to your
hmm
book, that's the part that you can't replicate, which is the connection to people. So it'll be
yeah.
really interesting to see how this all evolves. And
It will be.
I, yeah,
I'm keeping
I'm
an eye on it. It's coming whether we want it or not. And the restaurants that
agreed.
understand what to invest in and where will win. But I'm afraid a lot of people are looking at the shiny new toy and
Yes,
getting too buried into the analytics. And it's like we're restaurants. We're not saving lives here. We're just making
yes,
people happy. We're feeding you
yes,
and making you happy and giving you an experience. And we got to keep focusing on that.
yeah. And it's true too what you say about the I love all the tools out there. I think it's great that there's a constant push to evolve food
hmm
costing apparatus and
Yep.
ordering and all that stuff. But ultimately, it doesn't matter how much data you put into a beautiful unit of
hmm
measure database and a recipe database. You still have to manage the food cost, and you have to be with the
Exactly.
staff, and you got to make sure they're not cutting portions of salmon and throwing the heads and tails out without cleaning them well and
Right.
seeing if you get another portion. I mean, you really do manage the
Yeah.
food cost in the operation, just as
Right.
much as you create these theoretical goals.
hmm Yep. Those for me come after running the store,
I agree.
doing those key things. Then we're going to go look at that and say, okay, can we shave a quarter of a point or a half a point off labor because we use the AI tool to say we really don't need Susie to come in at 10:30 as a host. We can bring her in at
Right.
11. We really don't need four opening prep cooks. We could probably do three and put somebody on a mid and cut some hours. I mean, I'm all about optimizing that way as long as
Yeah.
it doesn't affect what I'm trying to do. I can tell when a restaurant is trying to make labor, and they're all of a
You
sudden
feel it.
when I see a server running, I know they cut somebody, right? Somebody
I
came
think
and
you
said, "Hey,
just,
you got to hit this number," and all of a sudden I got a server with 10 tables, and who's suffering but me? right?
I think you just described most of the dining experiences I've had in California over the last 2 years.
Oh,
So
I can't even imagine. So
it's
the restaurants that understand why they're in business are the ones that are going to succeed, regardless of what
yeah.
they do with the AI and the technology.
Well, I think we've established that most likely you won't be opening a restaurant in the near future. But
Probably not.
that said, if I don't know if you have kids or if you've got close youngsters in your life, but what would your response be to them if they wanted to get into industry now knowing all that you do? What's your automatic response when somebody says, "Hey, I want to open my own restaurant," or "I want to get into hospitality"? What's your first thought?
Hire or partner with somebody who does the things you don't like to do or don't want to do. Most people get into this business because they love food, they love people, they like the service part, right? That's where the
Yeah,
excitement is. I mean, I still love walking through the restaurants and talking to people. You know,
me
I'm
too.
working with a group now, and it's like, here, let me show you how to do a table touch because you don't know how to do it. I love doing that. I'll talk
That's
to people
a
that don't. So,
that's the next level of a CFO. By the way, I don't know many
right.
who can do that.
But the issue is, so if you love that, then make sure you're partnering with somebody that understands the finance. Okay.
Yes.
Most people neglect that and they keep saying, I'll do it tomorrow. Well, tomorrow's never show up. And
Yeah.
if you are somebody who is really in love with the economics of restaurants, and I've run into these people too that have a vision for growing a restaurant, and maybe they're good concept people,
Sure.
but they don't know how to cook a steak. They don't know how to
Sure.
run anything.
Yeah.
The guy that started Rainforest Cafe comes to mind. I mean,
Hmm.
brilliant concept, right?
Uh
If he
huh.
if he doesn't have a good ops team, none of those
Yeah.
concepts ever make it, right?
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
idea is if you're good, whether it's my children or I'm consulting with somebody who wants to open one, make sure you pair yourself with somebody who likes to do the stuff you don't.
I mean, if I ever open up a restaurant in the future, that means I'm going to have somebody counting inventory because that was the bane of my existence. I'll tell you that right now.
I know it. No fun,
No
right?
fun. Well, and then Bruce, last question for you.
Sure.
So, I love how deep your hands, your experience, your life goes into restaurants. And I'm shocked that you spent some time, you said cordon bleu or what you were
Yeah,
teaching? All right.
I was
So,
teaching culinary arts intro. I was the first chef you got, so I taught sanitation, knife
wow.
cuts, and cooking methods.
All right, Bruce. So if you're going to, and maybe this can be your our own little makeshift pretend at home version of your future restaurant, but what for you is a gratifying meal that you love to cook or a celebratory meal? Like, what's the first thing that comes to mind when it's time to, maybe we could become billionaires one day and we're going to open a restaurant? What would you actually like to open?
I love breakfast.
It's a
And I
moneymaker
often
too.
thought, yeah, I often thought it's like, some of those guys that have this breakfast lunch concept down, they got it made. I'm an early morning guy. So I'm
Okay.
up at 5 in the morning. So I don't mind getting up early. I kind of like this idea of, yeah, let's knock out everything between 6 a.m. and 1 p.m.
I love it too.
And then I got the rest of the day off.
I know. I know. What's your dish? What's your breakfast dish that you usually order?
Um, I'm an omelet guy, and I'll tell you my story of omelets, and it's what got me to fall in love with this industry. I was 10 years old, and my parents had some friends over, and this guy, for whatever reason, decided he was going to make us omelets, and he pulled out an omelet pan. He traveled with his own omelet pan, and he put it
Whoa.
on a stove, and he started chopping ingredients, and he sautéed the the vegetables and the ham in his omelet pan, added the eggs, and then he did the coolest thing I've ever seen. He flipped it. It's like, wow. I was 10 years old and I watched this guy do it. It's like, I am going to learn how to do that. And I did. So from the time I've been 10 years old, I have been an omelet maker and flipper. I still do
I
it to this
love it.
day.
And
Every Sunday morning I make omelets at home, and it's still the same method. Everything chopped up ahead of time, clarified butter in the omelet pan, vegetables, ham, whatever I got in the fridge.
I love it.
Put the eggs in there, got to get it to a nice brown, flip it, and then whatever cheese I'm going to put in there, finish it off.
I
Of
love
course,
it.
I like hot sauce, so then I got to finish off with hot sauce. But no, I that first restaurant I opened way back out of college, I did Sunday brunch, and I put in an omelet station, and I was the guy out there flipping omelets. In 1988 is when that
Oh
was.
my gosh. I love it.
So,
I love it. Well, I'm a big omelet guy myself, although for me, some really crispy fried eggs in hot olive oil with some Maldon salt is also one of my favorites. But
oh,
I
nice.
always get I always get omelets when I go out because it's one of those things I don't make at home. So I'll come to your restaurant, Bruce, when you're ready to open Bruce's Omelets. I'm there, 100%.
Okay, I
Well,
look forward
Bruce,
to it.
it was so nice to meet you. Where can people find you if they're looking for a fractional CFO? What are the best ways they can get in touch with you?
Um, well, gosh, right now, we're actually in a transition. I told you I brought on a marketing partner, so we are rebranding our company called
Okay,
Tempo Hospitality Group. So
excellent.
TEMPOHG.com is our,
TempoHG.com.
yeah, so Tempo, TEMPOHG.com is our new website. We're actually doing some pretty exciting things with bringing on Dan West, my new marketing partner. It's actually nice. You talk about things I hate to do. I hate marketing.
There you
I'm not
go.
a design guy, but Dan is. So
That's amazing.
we're recreating and reimagining how people can access us through that website. You can also order my book on Amazon, Audible, Kindle, or if you want a signed copy, brucelnelson.com, and you can
I
order it there and I'll
love it.
sign it and mail it to you.
That is awesome, Bruce. It was so nice to meet you. I'm glad to see that the restaurant DNA runs deep with you, my friend, and I really look forward to getting the opportunity to meet you in person. Thanks for joining the show and telling us your
Sounds
story.
great. All right. I appreciate it. Send me your address. I'll get you a book.
100%. Thanks for joining us, Bruce.
Cheers.
86 Reason Podcast was brought to you by Over Easy Office, outsourced bookkeeping solution.